Hi, Nat. This is
Hello.
Betsy, and we'll introduce ourselves to get started for the students and then just talk a little bit about meditation practice, which I'm excited to hear more about from you. So my name is Betsy Krakow. I'm the Executive Director of Wellbeing, Access, and Prevention. And as you may know, every Wednesday we try and develop some new messaging for students. This is the real deal. You know, we're being tested right now, and we can use all the tricks we can get to stay well. And so I know that you meditate. You're part of a contemplative pedagogy group, and I wonder if we could just start out with a little intro of you and a little bit of your backstory about how you got into contemplative practices.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for this initiative. It's really been a pleasure to see you sort of pulling together the elements of sort of mindfulness and meditation around the campus into sort of a unified whole. So the students are going to be lucky this year, and it's going to be a real treat. But about myself, the roots of my mindfulness practices and becoming contemplative, if you will, I traced them back to my grandmother and her mindfulness practice, which was really deeply rooted in her faith and social activism, which were in the Baptist church for her. She grew up on a plantation in Arkansas before she moved to Los Angeles by herself, but she always held on to that faith and that sort of tradition of tapping into a source bigger than herself. Mm. Yeah. And then I followed that thread to Ghana. I went to West Africa as a student, study abroad, and I saw also West Africans, you know, sort of tapping into this something bigger than themselves, and even they would use a gesture. They would point up and shake the hand, and you know that it was not just us could do it ourselves, that we needed to work together, and there was a bigger source. And then finally, when I graduated from college, I met a teacher, a meditation teacher actually, and I learned sort of static meditation, just sitting and meditating, and how wonderful that felt, and how it helped me plan and move forward. And that was inspirational. But it was only about 5 years ago, after my divorce, and when I found yoga. And that is what I refer to as moving meditation. Mm-hmm. So that really sort of helped heal me from all of the sort of depression I was suffering from. And actually, as I talk about in my TED Talk, it healed me from a lot of the anxiety I had experienced growing up in Los Angeles in 1992 during the uprisings then dealing with Rodney King. So very much similar and parallel to today's day with the George Floyd's murder and uprising. And so, yeah, a lot of stress as a kid growing up in those environments. And, but yeah, the practice sort of reduced my anxiety and depression. So that was how I found it in my life.
Which is an amazing story. And since you yourself are a teacher, and I know I'm going off script a little bit, but I love just following the trail. How did you find your teacher? So here you are, you've just graduated from undergrad. You had, sound like, a profound experience going to Ghana. What made you, did you look intentionally for a teacher? How did you come upon that? And how do you know, how do you know?
Great question. And I think I'm in similar situation to many of our students at UMass. I was just graduated, and I had a little bit of studies, like inklings with Muslims and Christians. And I asked my grandmother, she was still living at the time. She was probably about 80 years old. I asked her, I said, Grandma, which religion should I be? What religion should I be? And she gave me the best advice I ever received. She said, try them all. And I did. I went out on a quest around Los Angeles, where I was living after I graduated and teaching in South Central Los Angeles. And I went and visited basically each week a different church, a different faith tradition. And it was in the sort of the metaphysical sort of mindfulness teaching that I found my home, just a real focus on the body, the mind and the body, and looking inward, yeah, and
Yeah.
tapping into the source of that we're all connected to,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I think this idea too, and I'm going to let this roll as a conversation that, we know college students, because we were there, struggle with identity issues, and not even struggle, just are going through this exciting process of figuring out who they are. And we have all these courses and we have a course of studies, but we don't really talk about the pilgrimage of things or the quest. They use the word quest. It's like we go out finding something and we're going to go along the way, and I just wonder if this year of COVID, okay, I'm making it a year already, time of COVID is a time where you might suggest some kind of exploration of that sort, like a longer thing. I don't know. I'm
Absolutely.
pulled to it myself right now. Like if I had the time, I would take off and just start walking.
Right. No doubt. No doubt. I mean, and I already mentioned the healing and the sort of from the stress and the trauma in my own life. I failed to mention that I am a descendant of, well, I mentioned my grandmother who was raised on a plantation in Arkansas. So her mother was a sharecropper and her grandfather was actually born into slavery. And then I'm also a descendant of European ancestors who actually migrated west in covered wagons all the way to Spokane, Washington. And now many of that part of my family live in Hawaii. So I'm from this, these two things in my body is almost like our nation, right? Is this story of, two sort of different bodies, the white body and the black body, and then of course the indigenous, but the healing that this practice has provided in my own body. Now I'm really convinced that this is the healing that our nation can use to heal from our deep, long-standing intergenerational trauma. Yeah.
That's a big mission for us, isn't it, Nat? Wow. I'm 100% down with that. And so are all the trauma theorists, as you know, right? I mean, everything you listen to. And I think what we can offer the students, so I'm interested to hear your opinion on this, is we spend so much time in the head, but really this is all living in the body.
Right.
And it sounds like you came to that intuitively, this sense that, so maybe you could talk a little bit more about this body practice and yoga and in your life. And also, if you have a grand design about how to bring this healing to the nation, let's go for it.
Right. No, I can speak to both. The one thing let me just start off by thanking again, in addition to when I just started yoga, when I went on sabbatical to write this book about my grandmother, this great civil rights leader, I went to California for 1 year, and there I found the Naroga Institute. And I learned two important things there, and that I had known before I went there, which was that people who are incarcerated liked yoga, and also the people incarcerating them, prison guards and so forth, they also liked yoga. So to me, in my life, I had never found anything that those two constituencies really agreed on. And I thought, wow, this is something that I'm learning to teach, and that I could really sort of maybe heal and sort of help to dismantle this whole prison industrial complex using this practice. And so the Naroga Institute, I found out in Oakland, they actually do this work in the public schools and also a juvenile incarceration centers.
Yeah.
So their work inspired me to come back to the East Coast here and do this work in New Jersey. And that's where I've been working for 4 years in the public schools there with students. But it's really this book right here that I've been reading.
Oh my gosh. I just downloaded it. Unbelievable, right?
Yes, absolutely. Everyone at UMass has access to this book as a part of our library, free. And this is an incredible resource that we have access to. But this book solidified in my mind these two things that I had been weighing my whole life, which was racial justice and reparations. Really heal, but that it exists within our bodies, and that it's in our bloodstreams, and it's intergenerational, and there's no way we can think ourselves out of this. We have to actually get into our bodies and go to where all the sort of pain and suffering that has happened on this land, the United States, Turtle Island, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Happened.
What was the last thing that you just said, Nat? I think I lost you.
No, I was just saying that our bodies exist on this land, and all of the suffering has taken place here. And so we are connected with that, and we have to go through our bodies to heal.
Yeah. It's amazing stuff. And the research in there about the intergenerational piece.
Right.
Like the genetic passing on of these stressors. So, you were describing that you were growing up during the Rodney King era, and yet some of that was already in you from generations, and in all of us to some degree or another. And white people too have to, I think, come to terms with what that then means for them about what they're holding in their body too.
Unfortunately, I'm even seeing the start of the semester as less brown and black bodies on campus or on my Zoom classes than even in previous years. And it wasn't very many in previous years before. So I'm saddened about that. But what I'm encouraged by is what you just said. White bodies is super important to work with too, because of the trauma that has been inflicted upon them all these years as well, and the healing. So if we can heal, this predominantly white campus, it's going to do wonders for the rest of the country and the state and the world.
So I'm sure students are listening to this and hopefully feeling very compelled and excited. Although if they haven't read that book, they're probably like, what are y'all talking about? So we have to tell them Resmaa Menakem's where it's at. And then your book is going to be where it's at too, along the same theme. But they're thinking to themselves, okay, fine. What am I supposed to do now? How am I going to get this healing? Tell us about your either history of practice or your regular practice now, and how you think that helps you cope with everything you're dealing with now. And we're all, as I like to say, we're all in the soup. So I think students might have this illusion that we're okay and they're not. And, we're all kind of, I'm not saying we're not okay, but I'm going to say, okay, there are many days where I don't feel okay lately.
Right. No doubt. No doubt. I'll just explain just some of the basics, how I think of it, and how I've been trained again at the Naroga Institute by the founder BK, just to think about the ABCs of dynamic mindfulness. So for dynamic mindfulness, there are three main components. And the first one, the A, is about action. And action is the movement that we talk about with moving meditation, because we actually get at the trauma that's stored in our body. And in this book, Resmaa also talks about the vagus nerve, which is something that I'm only learning about, but it's the longest nerve in our body. And when we twist it, we activate it. And that activates a sort of an ancient part of our brain where this trauma lives. And we can release ourselves from some of that trauma through these movements. So the first one is action. And that's why I'm a proponent of moving meditation. As part of my story, go.
No, I mean, it's where Zoom is so draining for us, because literally we're not moving our vagus nerve at all. We're just this, right? Yeah, so.
I'm starting every class this year with the dynamic mindfulness practice, 15 minutes at the beginning. But I think you're right. I should disperse smaller practices throughout to get us moving in that way. But yeah, so that movement is that first action and part of that healing. The second one is for the B. The B is for breathing. And it turns out that the breath regulates our emotions. And so when we feel, the greatest part I feel about being human is the immense emotions that we get to experience, from joy to sadness and elation and surprise and so many emotions. But those emotions are like a roller coaster. But sometimes we don't want to be so much on the roller coaster of the too high or the too low. And we're able to use our breath to regulate our emotions and put ourselves right where we sort of ideal that you want to be at the optimal state. So there's a lot of breath techniques that I share with my students when teaching dynamic mindfulness, and I'm sure many of the UMass Meditates facilitators will be sharing.
Mhm.
That will help sort of with us
Yep.
regulate.
Great.
And the final one, of course, is the centering. And I use a little chime here, a bell, that I ring that sort of can allow you just to focus on one thing. So with meditators, often they'll say focus on one thing with your eyes. In this case, I'm using something with the sound, but to center the attention and narrow the focus so that all of the things that the brain can think about, the past oftentimes includes some type of depression, or the future includes some type of anxiety, but peace, as Lao Tzu says, lives in the present moment. And so getting us to be present and focused is just a way to also bring joy and pleasure and happiness.
And relief. I was just listening. My meditation teacher lives in Santa Cruz, and he had to evacuate his house with his family. And he gave that exact talk yesterday because they did finally get to return, but they thought their house was going to burn down. So pandemic and, fires, that's some serious stress. And he talked about the capacity to come into the present moment every once in a while, even despite that. So, that is the source of great relief of our suffering, is the present moment, I think. Hard to do, really hard to do. We're not trained for it, I guess, is the other thing. Get your reps in is the thing. You have to train.
Yes, this is a practice that we call it a practice, a daily practice. And when I gave my TED talk, I recommended everyone 5 minutes a day. Like I did a 5-minute sun salutation before I ever took up my formal yoga class. I did 5-minute sun salutation every single day, and it rewired my brain in ways that I'm still, coming to understand today by reading books like this. It's helping me understand what it was doing to me.
Yeah, such a rich tradition that's now the neurosciences keep catching up with it, but folks were onto something. Well, I know that I am constantly accused of having these conversations go too long because I'm used to a 50-minute hour, and I'm endlessly curious about people. So there's about 5 million other questions that I would like to ask you, and I hope that maybe we can do a second installment. But this little podcast, mini podcast, is for the purpose of kind of kicking off our UMass Meditates effort. So this will air hopefully September 14th. I wonder if you can say a little bit about that project.
Okay, well, the UMass Meditates project is, along with this year, has made me one of the most exciting semesters I'm entering, because as you're saying, for how to heal the world, I see this project as a piece of the stone, a foundation to this massive healing. And so how I'm looking at it is, this project of UMass Meditates, what we've done is we've curated a series of about 14 facilitators and meditators of different traditions that exist sort of throughout the world, that we're going to be sharing with the students over the semester, hopefully the year and for years to come. But my hope is that this eventually builds into sort of a center that we can actually come to physically and practice together, potentially have residence halls connected where people who are interested in this are attracted to come to UMass as a destination to live on campus and do these practices, learn these practices. And that really what we're building toward and what we're getting ourselves centered and focused and healed for, in preparation for, is this process of reparations, okay? Mm-hmm. And the reparations are to two distinct communities, but they're for all of us because it's repair for all of us. But first is to the indigenous Native Americans. UMass Amherst is located on Nahuatl land. Mm-hmm. And so first, repaying indigenous folks for land that was stolen, but then also paying Africans for the labor that was stolen. And this practice prepares us to have those conversations. And this is the moment for America's final healing. And I see a UMass Meditates Center. I even have a title for a center. I'm going to go out here, propose the center's title.
I love it. What?
A center for reparations, healing, intergenerational, racialized trauma, and white body supremacy.
You are onto something. I can see the recruitment happening already. That's pretty exciting stuff. I can see some pieces evolving, but we start, you know, this is the thing. These are long-term projects that we have to have the patience for, right? Like we have to not give up. And I know it's been frustrating a little bit to try and, you know, put this Meditates project up very quickly, but every step is moving. What I think is so exciting is that you are tying it to these bigger issues and have this ultimate goal in mind. Like, we're not thinking small here.
No, this is not the time. I mean, coronavirus is once in a century thing, and the uprisings that we got to see after the, you know, horrific killing of George Floyd in all 50 states I had never seen before in support of Black lives. But then around the world, nations came out in support of us, African peoples, and our struggles sort of in the United States, and in support of Black lives, which I had never seen other countries come out in support of Black lives. So that was amazing. So this is the moment for us all to stand up for what we really truly believe and what we, you know, what's in our heart, what we want to see happen. And this practice us to knowing what's in our heart, what our true heart wants.
Yeah. My teacher talks about really like we get still so that we can come to the truth of who we are, which is, you know, a project, but a very worthy one. So, well, you know, I can't let this interview go without asking you about your name, honestly, and then maybe that's a good spot to conclude and seat ourselves for the next conversation.
Okay.
You have a lot of names.
The 30-second remix version of my name. I tell this story all the time. I love this story so much. So I was born Charu Nat Turner. My parents are both revolutionaries. They're communists, Marxists, and they followed a revolutionary named Charu Mazumdar in India. He led the largest communist revolution in India. In the state that he led that revolt, and is still communist to this day. But so that's one name. They named me after him. They were following him. They liked him. But my other names are Nat Turner, and I'm going to link it all back to you in a second. So Nat Turner, in case you don't know, he led the largest slave rebellion in United States history, which is a history that most people don't know because it's not taught in schools. The concept in sort of traditional schooling is that slavery wasn't so bad and slaves, you know, Africans went along with it. But in fact, there was a really strong history of rebellion and protest. And so Nat Turner is credited with the largest rebellion. And so my parents gave me that name as well. So two revolutionary names. Now, the Kofi I added myself. I got in Ghana, in West Africa. When I returned as an African American, you know, we have been sort of separated from our West African lineage in certain ways. But I reclaimed it in Ghana, and they told me my name, which I'm born on Friday. They have 7 names for the 7 days of the week. So I'm born on Friday. And for each day of the week, it comes with 2 characteristics from God. And for Kofi, Friday born, my 2 characteristics are innovative and loving.
There you go. That's better than any horoscope I ever read.
Right. And the nickname for Kofi over there in Ghana is Kofi Baboni, and that means troublesome Kofi. They are too much trouble. And I don't know whether it's the Friday's a kind of a fun day or a release day or something, But if you can tell, that links back to my other names.
Yeah.
Nat Turner and Charu Mazumdar were both troublesome for some people,
Yeah.
because they were very loving of their people and very innovative to lead a revolution.
Yeah. Yeah. So is Turner your parents' last name?
That is my parent last name, my father's last name. And
Just worked out that way.
just throw it
Or
out.
is there a actual lineage tie to Nat Turner?
My grandmother, she says that I am a descendant of Nat Turner, but I don't exactly believe her.
You got
But
to go visit Skip Gates. Get your, you know what the guy that does from Harvard, is from Harvard, right?
there's that genealogy.
Yeah, the genealogy.
But
Well,
definitely said
go
that
ahead.
he wants me to consider him my ancestor, and I do 100%.
Why not? Yeah, that's great. That is a pretty kick-ass story. I love it. And this has been a really fun conversation. I'm sorry it's a little bit brief, but thank you for taking the time. And I hope that students will listen to, I think we could talk even more if we have the time, and will maybe in the future, your personal healing journey, because I think people are in pain, at a global level, at a social justice level, and really at a lived level, at the sitting in isolation. We've done research with students already, and worries about finances, worries about isolation, motivation are all their concerns. And I think these grounding practices that, if we could start with the body and move from there, we can move mountains. So, and feel a little bit better while doing it. So,
And make the campus a hospitable place that everybody wants to be here, of every color, shade, and just feels welcome.
yeah, I mean, it's a maybe radical thing to say. I don't know. I mean, Bell Hooks has said it, but if we could build a reputation at UMass of a campus that is based in love, I would be down for that.
Our project is, we're doing it.
All right. Well, thank you for your light, and we will see you on the organizing side around UMass Meditates. And I hope the students enjoy this, and we'll talk again soon.
Aloha.
Aloha.